This BizNews Briefing is brought to you by Investec Business Banking. Make the move to transactional banking with simple, transparent fees. Hello, good evening or good afternoon and welcome. Today's the 28th of January. It's Tuesday and a big day for politics in South Africa. The Democratic Alliance gave us a report back on the meeting that it held with its federal executive yesterday, a whole day meeting. And my colleagues Patrick and Kerry, that's Patrick Kidd and Kerry Lanigan, applied their minds to that more than 1 hour long briefing and came up with this highlights package.
There's no point in being in government if you can't govern. There's no point in bringing 3.5 million votes to a table and you can't influence the policy and direction of that government or the programs of that government. We regard the GNU as South Africa's most precious asset at the moment in terms of what it holds in its hands, the future of the country, the future of the economy, the future of our people. And that is why all parties to the GNU need to be good stewards and good responsible stewards of the GNU. But being a responsible steward means that you have to be a reliable coalition partner and a trustworthy coalition partner as well. So when you make decisions and you don't consult the rest of your party, the parties in the coalition, without even giving a courtesy call to the leaders, knowing how contentious the expropriation bill has been, knowing the fact that you received a 2-page submission from the Minister of Public Works with a legal opinion from senior counsel attached, pointing out the constitutional problems with the bill, and you simply go ahead and do it, and the leaders of your coalition find out about it on social media, that is not being a good steward or a good partner of the GNU. And that is our gripe. Now, I believe that we could quite easily have found a way through this particular impasse had there been a discussion amongst leaders. There's a number of options. There was nothing instructing the president to sign this bill. There was no urgency on it. We could have had a discussion about it. We could have decided to refer it back to Parliament. We could have amended it there using the GNU's majority in Parliament to come up with a bill that met all of these requirements. Or the president could have simply called us in and given us his reasons why he was going to proceed. Instead, all brushed aside. I found out on social media on my way back from Davos that this bill had been signed.
When we signed the statement of intent, which was in itself a huge education for me, clause 24 said, for the people who agree to come into this, and that's when we signed it, if any people are added, or if any parties are added, it'll have to be in consultation with each other. And at that time, and at the time that we elected President Ramaphosa as president of the country, because that was when the statement of intent became operable, there were 3 founding parties. There was the DA, there was the ANC, and there was the Inkatha Freedom Party. Within 4 or 5 days, the president was announcing all sorts of other people who joined, without any respect for clause 24, as if it didn't exist. And I could only conclude to myself, either they couldn't care that it exists, or they don't know that it exists, or they're doing whatever they want anyway. And that was our first huge red light. The only parties that can actually bring down the government are the DA and the ANC. Every other party in the government is there by grace and favour of President Ramaphosa. And if you are a minister or a deputy minister or a chair of a committee or whatever it is you are, you have to please President Ramaphosa because he is the person who holds your fate in his hands. And of course, that's why the ANC wants a whole lot of smaller parties, because then they have a little hallelujah chorus that supports them on everything that they do. And it's very convenient with the ANC not always to have to fight with us. They get their proxies to fight with us. And then it looks different. But their proxies, of course, are going to side with the ANC, no matter what they said in the election, because Ramaphosa can relieve them from their positions. Now, we are not there by grace and favour of the president. We are there by grace and favour of the voters. The voters gave us the balance of power. And so we go there to represent the 3.5 million people who voted for us. And we have to say to those people, we can't get everything we want. Because if we wanted everything we wanted, we had to get 50% plus one of the vote. But we're in a coalition to share power. And so don't get upset with us when we have to compromise now and again, because we didn't get enough votes. If you don't want us to compromise, give us more votes. But the ANC has to say that too.
Well, a lot going on there, but it does appear for the moment anyway that the Government of National Unity is holding. John Steenhuisen was asked a question later in that press conference. How long does he think it will hold for? And he reckons for the next 2 years. Well, why? Surely at some point in time, the Democratic Alliance would say thus far and no further. Well, maybe not. Rob Hersov, a capitalist activist, had a fascinating conversation with me earlier today. We tend to catch up every 2 weeks. And I put to him, why is it that the DA does not walk out of the Government of National Unity, as David Ansara said yesterday, and just get on with playing the best role it can for those 3.5 million people who voted for it? Rob had some interesting insights.
So the informed position is the DA just need to keep on fighting. I'll give you Gayton's view on this thing, which is very interesting. In the Bella Bill, there was consultation. Cyril did, or the ANC did, along the way, back and forward with the members of the GNU, which is how things should happen. And it ends up where it ends up, whether we agree or not. It didn't happen with this EWC bill. Cyril just signed it unilaterally, and he undermined his partners in the GNU, and that is unacceptable. And he's going to take a verbal pounding on Wednesday at the budget meeting from the DA, who have already called for this to be motioned, and from the Patriotic Alliance and all the non-ANC partners. His behavior is unacceptable. But the DA, Patriotic Alliance, and others must not pull out of the GNU. David Ansara is wrong. And much as though I agree with David and back him and hold him on a pedestal, this is not the moment to pull out of the GNU, because if you don't like expropriation without compensation, the bill, forget about the wording. It really is expropriation with some negotiation is what it really is. Just the name is horrific. I mean, how to prevent foreign direct investment in this country is have a name of a bill called expropriation without compensation. Moronic. Change the name. But nonetheless, why even sign it? And why not consult your partners? But Cyril's going to take a pounding. But if you want Jacob Zuma to walk through the door and be the partner of the ANC, you will have expropriation immediately. So do not, DA and PA, do not draw a line in the sand on this one. Keep fighting, keep pushing back, keep putting Cyril, who's completely isolated under pressure, fight, but stay within the GNU. It would be the worst thing of all to pull out of the GNU. And Helen Zille agrees with me, and Gayton McKenzie agree with me. Spoken to both of them. So the GNU must hold, and it must hold for the next 2-3 years, even if it goes sideways, even if it tacks back and forward, even if it doesn't deliver economic growth. And Gayton said a very amusing thing to me yesterday. He said, you caught us all napping, everyone in the GNU, because you said in your recent Sizwe podcast and the recent BizNews one, nobody in the GNUs even mentioned the words economic growth. And he said, we all realize that's absolutely true. None of us are talking about it. And he said to me the 3 reasons for the GNU in this order, in this priority. 1, keep MK out. 2, deliver economic growth, because that lifts all boats. And 3, crime, solve the issue of crime, make people feel safe. So those are the priorities in that order. So the immediate priority is keep Jacob Zuma and MK out of the government, which means you've got to stay with the GNU.
Okay, well, there are all kinds of perspectives on this, but I've got to ask you the Frans Cronje view of the bayonet, that as the bayonet gets pushed in, and that's ANC approach, if not Cyril's, certainly the party and the National Democratic Revolution kind of approach, as you push the bayonet in and until you hit steel, you keep pushing. Now, how much further must the bayonet be pushed in? What's next before there is some steel from the partners in the GNU?
So the steel's happening. They're coming together. Remember, the GNU is 6-7 months old. And we all look at Bella moving forward, NHI moving forward, this preposterous, racist 100 billion rand fund to invest in, basically non-white, non-Indian, non-colored businesses is really what it's about. It's a racist bill of Parks Tar, who there are glimmers of hope in that man, but, pushing that forward is not what should be happening. Good for Dean McPherson to stand against it and the expropriation bill. But what is happening is this is forging together what I think in 2029 will be the formation of a new political party in South Africa. It will be the first center-right, true center-right, pro-property rights, pro-free speech, libertarian, capitalist political party in South Africa, which doesn't really exist. I mean, if you take who are the most conservative pro-property rights, pro-free speech organizations, it would be Patriotic Alliance, FF Plus, Freedom Front Plus, and Inkatha, with DA being sort of a wimpy version of the Democrats, as an American kind of example. If those can get together for 2029, which I think will happen, we will have a proper centrist party that we really need. And obviously, who my vote would be to run this is our future potential benevolent dictator, Gayton McKenzie. This is what's happening. Steel's coming, and it's forging this. This will take a while to take place, but it's going to happen.
There's a lot more to come on that interview, and you can pick it up on BizNews TV. Well, it seems like everybody now wants to settle down, stop the fighting, and continue with a government of national unity. But there's another big problem just around the corner. We have a national budget that is going to need to be passed in February, a couple of weeks' time. The finance minister will be standing up in the parliament to present his budget, and then it needs to be voted forward. But one of the big problem areas, and this is a no-go area for the DA, as you'll hear in just a moment, is the proposed bailout of Transnet. I spoke today to Mark Burke, who is the Democratic Alliance's spokesman on finance, given that this is such an important point, and said to him, but why are you against this? The bailout of Eskom seems to have worked. We've had more than 300 days load shedding free. He illuminated me.
The definition of has worked is open for interpretation in that our lights have been on for more than 300 days. We're grateful for that. The cost per kilowatt hour produced is mind-boggling in South Africa at the moment. And the number of employees per kilowatt hour produced is disproportionate to anywhere else in the world. So it's worked in that we've chucked a bunch of money at a problem, and for the time being, the lights are on. But it's not worked in terms of making government more efficient and procuring at more preferential terms than anybody else in South Africa. International experts are telling us we pay 2 or 3 times the market rates for anything we procure in South Africa. And we keep chucking money, by the way, that we don't have. There's one source for public money, and that's public taxpayers. And so, yes, our lights are on at Eskom, but we have to ask ourselves, is that an efficient cost? Now, onto the problem of Transnet, there's this concept in business called bike shedding, which is if you are building a nuclear reactor, the process of conceptualizing the design and consulting with folks on how that should look is so complex that folks check out and everybody starts chatting for 2 hours about the bike shed being built for employees right next to the nuclear reactor. And because that's at least something they can conceptualize. Now, to your point of Brian Molefe and co, this is exactly what happened. Transnet is such a complex beast that these folks were able to steal there because most people check out of the complexity of a super entity that should really be 40 separate entities. Each of them run efficiently where it makes sense for the public sector to own it. That's fine. But for the most part, the private sector should be running these entities. And so that has to be a precondition for any further support, and can't look like a bailout. It at best can look like bridging finance to get us to that point.
But how are you going to get that message through?
Well, the fact of the matter is we all jointly promised in our midterm budget statement at the end of last year, and I count the Minister of Finance in there, and an ANC minister, our Deputy Minister and Finance, and so forth. We all promised there will be no further bailouts. The fiscus cannot afford it. We're at a point now where South Africa's debt to GDP ratio is 75%. Now, 15 years ago when I was a student, I looked at these numbers and we were in the mid-20s, and I was pretty excited to live in a country where elsewhere in the world these numbers were skyrocketing. But over, a decade and a half, we've just kept swiping the credit card to insane levels at the moment, where the biggest line item on our national budget is the servicing of that debt. So the only way that we could, facilitate another bailout, which is unfathomable to the DA, is to go ahead and borrow some more, for which the interest payments will increase at a time when we can't even afford enough teachers in our schools. These things are inconceivable.
At Sun Exchange, we make going solar simple, profitable, and completely risk-free. Join over 100 satisfied South African customers already enjoying the benefits of risk-free solar. Start saving today. Visit sunexchange.com and join the solar revolution.
In the world of business banking, the bottom line can often triumph over relationships. At Investec, we value both. Make the move from business as usual to Investec Business Banking. Out of the ordinary.
Well, that interview with Mark Burke is also in full on BizNews. And really what he's proposing is that, like any business that would get into the complications that Transnet's had, you'd look at it from the basis of how are you going to make this work rather than just pumping more and more money into it. Of course, in this case, the shareholders in this business called Transnet are us, the taxpayers, and we've got no rights whatsoever, it seems, apart from telling government not to do it. But they will borrow more money, pump it into Transnet, and who knows, may or may not work out. But in a business, what you would do is have a look at it and find out how many of those units within the organization are sustainable, are workable, and break it down into that. Either do the old Jack Welch story of fix, close, or sell. And that is the proposed approach, rather than just throwing good money after bad. As mentioned, that is on BizNews TV. Fascinating interview. Well, let's get on to the big story of the investment markets at the moment. And if you have been following in the last 2 days, there's been a seismic reaction to the fact that the Chinese company DeepSeek, which is an artificial intelligence company that is almost as good as ChatGPT, certainly the coders and those inside the industry say that DeepSeek is not quite there, but it's a long way towards what ChatGPT offers, but at 1/20th of the cost. And this is the problem. It hammered some of the big tech stocks, including, and we'll talk a little later about it, Nvidia. But here's some really good background that was put together by our partners at the Financial Times at London, which will help us all to better understand what these tsunamis have been that have hit financial markets in the past 48 hours.
It was a dramatic start to the week on Wall Street. Tech companies reported heavy losses yesterday. Nvidia was hit hardest. The chipmaker's shares plunged almost 17%, knocking about $600 billion off its market value. The S&P 500 closed 1.5% lower, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite fell 3%. It was all in response to DeepSeek, which unveiled its latest AI model last week. the Chinese startup appears to have made some major advances. And the kicker, it did so with fewer Nvidia chips. Now, investors are wondering if the U.S. can keep its edge in the AI race. My colleague Eleanor Olcott is here to explain DeepSeek's disruption. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi.
So what's the background on DeepSeek? What do I need to know about it?
So when I started reporting on the Chinese race to kind of replicate ChatGPT in early 2023, someone mentioned to me this mysterious hedge fund that had managed somehow to build one of the largest clusters of Nvidia GPUs in China. And basically the founder of DeepSeek, Liang Wenfeng, he took a team of his engineers from the hedge fund to this new startup, and they started just working on frontier LLM research. And what's happened over the past month or so is DeepSeek's released 2 models that they claim to have been trained on very few chips, but that achieve comparable results to models from the likes of OpenAI and Meta.
So what's this large language model like? I mean, does it really rival ChatGPT? Have you played around with it at all?
Yes, I have played around with it. And more importantly, I've been speaking to developers and they say it's really, really good. It's very competitive. Now, what DeepSeek released last week is a fairly new area of AI research. Basically, these are models that can automatically learn and improve themselves without the need for human supervision. This is seen as a technical pathway towards achieving AGI, that's kind of AI that's capable of human reasoning. And the reason why DeepSeek's paper release last week was so significant is it's the first time we've had a really detailed technical paper explaining how to train a reasoning model. Now, this is a big moment in the AI community, and it's a huge moment that this comes from the first time from a Chinese lab that no one's heard of before.
Yeah, and to what extent is the U.S. at risk of losing its edge when it comes to the development of AI? I mean, what are the global implications of this?
The global implications are huge, right? I mean, I think the US ecosystem has become incredibly confident that all of the big talent, the big players are in this small area of Silicon Valley. But China has proven itself. Having said that, the Chinese players that we talk to are very fearful that actually when the next generation of Nvidia GPUs, that's the Blackwell series, comes online and are accessible to the US rivals, that actually you're going to see this gap opening up again. So the race is by no means over, but what we will continue to see are Chinese companies building, launching, and rolling out AI models and products in a very competitive manner.
Eleanor Olcott is the FT's China technology correspondent. Thanks, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Fascinating times in investment markets, and the big story that we've seen has been all about DeepSeek and the implications or the impact of DeepSeek on the investment markets has been significant. Yesterday on the New York Stock Exchange and on NASDAQ was the biggest single one-day loss in market cap by any company. Well, what that means is that the value of Nvidia fell by 1.5 times the value of the South African economy. Imagine that. All the money spent in the South African economy in a whole year, in other words, our GDP. Nvidia's share price, the value of its company, fell so much that it lost 1.5 times South Africa's GDP in one day. And as you can see from those of you who are watching this, that is by far the biggest loss by any company in a single day, more than double the previous biggest loss of Nvidia's, which was going back to September last year. And then before that, February 2022, the loss of $250 billion by Meta. Meta, incidentally, was one of those stocks that seemed not to have been too bothered by the entry of DeepSeek. We'll talk about that in a moment. But ASML today trades in, it's listed on both a number of stock exchanges, but it is listed on Wall Street, and it's likely to open a little bit weaker. But today it dropped by 11.5%. That is in Amsterdam, what you can see, sorry, that's over the last 5 days, it's down by 11.5%. But as you can see, it's starting to claw its way back. Got to about 620 euros, now 653 euros. Looking ahead, Nvidia also appears to have hit a bottom, at least temporarily. It fell very sharply yesterday, nearly 17%, but in the pre-market, it's up by 2.5%. So from $118, where it finished yesterday, down from over $140 not long ago, it's now back above $120. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, a massive maker of chips. Similar story there, down 13% in the past day, yesterday, but a $3 improvement, 1.5% improvement in the pre-market. Palantir, one of the top AI stocks and one that's done so well for the BizNews tribe, that is stabilized, was only down by 4.5% yesterday. And Meta Platforms, one of the unusual stocks, given that it has such an AI footprint, it actually went up yesterday despite the turmoil all around it. Microsoft, similarly, a 1% gain yesterday. That might have been helped by news from Donald Trump that Microsoft is in the process of bidding to acquire ByteDance in the United States, in other words, the TikTok operation there. And finally, Bitcoin, which also took a big knock when the entry of DeepSeek was seen in the markets. That has lifted its head up and it's back above $100,000 per Bitcoin at the moment. Well, we've got a couple of interesting clips to finish the show with. The first comes from Kathy Wood to give us her insights into what the whole DeepSeek is about. Kathy is the chief executive of ARC. She's also someone who's invested heavily into innovation and into the new technology era. Her biggest stock that she holds is Tesla. Let's have a listen.
Big question. Are you buying the dip?
Well, we're fully invested, and we're very comfortable being fully invested. I think our confidence in the bull market broadening out has increased in the last few days. So, sure, the mega caps we think will continue to do well. Maybe Nvidia, there are some questions about its exalted position in the training chip market. We think inference is going to become more important with these new reasoning models, and that is a more competitive part of the market. But we think that what's happening here is the collapse in the cost of innovation. DeepSeek is adding to it. It has been happening, though. AI training costs have been dropping, led by Nvidia, 75% per year. And AI inference costs have been dropping 85 to 90% per year. DeepSeek is just putting those very rapid declines into a bit of overdrive here.
So I wonder if you see Nvidia falling much further. Is this an attractive price to be buying it, do you think?
Well, we own it in some of our portfolios. We are not buying the dip yet. We do want to learn more about DeepSeek and more about how the market or the demand for inference chips might outpace those for training chips. We think the whole area is going to be vibrant. We just think there might be a little bit more of an adjustment to this new reality.
Where you say that what DeepSeek shows is kind of that you can do more with less capex.
Yes.
Who do you think that's going to motivate in the US most, as Donald Trump is kind of saying? Who's going to be best at doing more with less?
Well, anyone using AI. We are focused on the productivity gains for knowledge workers, which are going to be massive. That's the biggest impact of AI. But if we're looking at sectors and spaces generally, where this acceleration in innovation is going to be meaningful, we think autonomous mobility, so robo-taxis, we think that's going to scale from essentially nothing now to an $8 to $10 trillion global opportunity, including China. But the sleeper here is healthcare. And we're seeing the convergence of sequencing technologies, all kinds of sequencing technologies, artificial intelligence, and then gene editing technologies like CRISPR-Cas9. That combination, we believe, is going to cure disease. It's already curing disease, sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. That's CRISPR Therapeutics. But we think they're aiming now for type 1 and type 2 diabetes. That would be a category killer. So think about that, curing disease, AI helping us decode the secrets of life, death, health.
Fabulous. Well, there's the upside for artificial intelligence. And not everybody is waving a white flag, as, by the way, the South African troops did apparently today in the DRC. They were surrounded by the Rwanda-backed rebels. Another 4 South Africans have passed. They were killed. And that takes the total now to 14 South African troops that lost their lives in the DRC. And, we'll hear more about that in due course, no doubt. But as far as white flags and stock markets are concerned, Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest names on Wall Street, is not capitulating and certainly doesn't believe that the entry of DeepSeek means the end of the stock market bull run in the United States. Here's the chief global strategist, Peter Oppenheimer, talking to our partners at Bloomberg.
You've seen many a fractious moment in these markets. Tell me what you saw yesterday and what it signaled to you, and what did you say to clients?
Hi, Manus. Yeah, well, I think that the first thing to say is that this needs to be seen in context. These stocks, of course, have had a tremendous rise, dominating the market over the last year or two. Roughly half of the S&P's return came from the biggest 5 stocks through the course of last year. And it did reflect and continues to reflect their very strong fundamentals. But of course, it's not just about outcomes, but outcomes relative to expectations. And I think as people came into the year, their confidence in the continued dynamics of these dominant tech stocks continuing to drive the market was probably too high. And so they were vulnerable, I think, to any setback in expectations. And that's really what we've seen.
But then we come back again today, Peter. I know we haven't fully made up of the damage that we had yesterday, but the irony of it is that these were the stocks that people had been fleeing to safety. It was seen as a safe part of this equity market. Do you think yesterday will force a change in investor behavior, that constant buying of the dip, constant buying tech is the only thing, the U.S. exceptionalism? Did all of that change yesterday?
Well, I don't think it did, because fundamentally the US exceptionalism story, which has really been dominant since the financial crisis, has reflected fundamentals. The US stock market has outpaced others in terms of its underlying profit growth, largely led by technology, which has outpaced other sectors. And of course, the dominant companies have been the key beneficiary of that. None of that has really changed. But of course, markets have become historically concentrated, and optimism going into this year was extremely high, and that leaves them vulnerable to a setback. But I don't think it really changes the underlying fundamental story, and we shouldn't lose focus on the fact that the global economy, and the US in particular, remains pretty robust, and interest rates are coming down, and those are underlying foundations that we think are still pretty supportive for the market and indeed the tech sector.
A rational perspective there from Peter Oppenheimer, who is the chief global strategist at Goldman Sachs. Well, Bronwyn Nielsen will be back with you tomorrow, and hopefully giving you some good news about interest rates in South Africa. Most people are forecasting another quarter percentage point, or 0.25% or a quarter percentage point cut in South African interest rates when the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee meets over the next 2 days. But she'll be giving you that good news. And from me and the rest of the BizNews team, until the next time, cheerio. This BizNews Briefing is brought to you by Investec Business Banking. Make the move to finance solutions that enable real growth.